Robotterne kommer, det har vi jo hørt mange gange før. Som tegner og forfatter har jeg nok hele tiden tænkt, at det var sådan noget, fabriksarbejdere kunne være truet af. Men for nylig begyndte de her AI-genererede billeder er lavet af maskiner, som for eksempel Midjourney, at dukke op på nettet. Og nogle af de billeder, de er altså ret vilde. Dave McKean kender I sikkert godt. Han er jo en kunstner, der var hurtig til at tage Photoshop til sig, og altid har været klar til at prøve nye ting af og nye teknologier. Han har skrevet en ny bog, der hedder PROMT, som handler om lige præcis AI. Jeg har taget en snak med ham om hans bog, om truslen fra AI, og om hvad kunst egentlig er for noget. Hello, Dave. It's an honor to speak to you, and obviously you've had such a long and wide-ranging career that there are a million things that we could be talking about. But this discussion of AI-created art is all over my Facebook feed these days, and you just published a book about it, so I thought it was highly relevant to talk to you. The book is called PROMT. What prompted you, pun intended, to write this book?
Well, I think, like all of us, we've started to see these AI images popping up on Facebook feeds and news feeds. I was curious as to what they were, where they'd come from. I did about an hour's research, and then fell on the floor in a sort of blind panic and thought, "That's it, really. That's it. They're just doing my job. I'm now redundant." There's absolutely no reason why any art director or company would bother to ask an illustrator to make an image when they can just type a few words into AI and come up with perfectly reasonable, actually very sophisticated solutions to that problem, and an infinite amount of them. This is a marketing department's wet dream of a technology. So I was either going to retire or respond. So I spent what ended up being 12 days solid just making Midjourney images or AI images. And on the first day, I decided it was going to be a book, because I make books and I think in comics, sequences of images. I happened to be thinking about a project around the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is our oldest known story. And so that became the first. It's like an exercise, really, that I could feed the lines from our most current translation of Gilgamesh back into AI to turn it back from a completely visual stone cuneiform language by anonymous hands 4,000 years ago through 4,000 years of history to anonymous AI, completely visual, stone-carved images, to see if something of the narrative would survive that bizarre conversation. So that was my first exercise. The second exercise was just about seeing how AI saw us now in the present. And then that was me getting used to using it to see what its strengths were and where its weaknesses were. And for the book, to show my readers the power of it and what it could do. And then taking all my lessons and thoughts and experiences from doing that into the third part, which was a conversation with AI, asking it questions and seeing how it would respond, and mulling over the ethical questions that I thought it had kicked up, and where I am in all of this. How do I fit in? And then how do we all fit in? How does this affect society? How does this affect our mental health? How does this affect our definitions of creativity and art? I understand everything changes, everything moves on. Okay, if that's the world we're moving into, okay. But I don't see anybody really asking those questions. Why we're doing this? Is this the world we want to move into? Other digital factors have meant that it's now increasingly difficult to make a living as a writer or as a musician. They're being squeezed from every side to deliver more and more for less and less money for an audience that have come from a position of just download it for nothing and now begrudgingly pay streaming services. I mean, what do musicians get now? 0.001% of a cent every time their tune is done. I mean, it's not possible to make a living doing this. And if it's not possible to make a living doing this, it's not possible to be professional doing this. To be great, you need to live it. You need to be doing it all the time. You can't just do it in your lunch breaks.
Is it true you really created this book in 12 days?
Yes, and honestly, I could have done it quicker than that because it just spits out things every 2 minutes. It spits out another image for me to use. I probably could have put in a good couple of long days and got it done. The only one that really took me time was the final one, where I was considering the questions and implications and wanted to have some kind of coherent conversation with myself walking around Rye Harbour and with AI, and try and come up with some sort of conclusions. And it was hard to come up with the conclusions because we're trying to imagine in the future how this is going to be.
On your website, it says the book is out of stock. I assume you have more coming.
Yeah, we were rather deluged with orders, so we're just trying to get through the first huge chunk of orders. We've also been dealing with Brexit and the dreadful fallout of all of that rubbish, which has affected trying to get anything shipped anywhere. So we're now just about on top of it. I think this week we'll be on top of it, and then I'll put more books for sale up on the website. It'll be back online again. There are a couple of distribution companies, Art Data, Forbidden Planet, Gosh Comics in London, who have copies. But this was just a limited edition that I wanted to do to get out, to start the conversation, and then we'll look at doing a mass market edition.
Some people are arguing that AI like Midjourney is a tool, much like Photoshop, and therefore we shouldn't worry so much about the robots coming to take our jobs. But what's your take on that?
In one sense, of course, it is an extremely powerful tool. And I've used it for work, and I've used it to generate material and incorporate it into my working method. And that's absolutely fine. I've never seen the gap between the complete lack of effort of any kind going in and the huge sophistication of the end result coming out. This is not the same as any other technological tool. People saying, oh, this is just like Photoshop. It really is not like Photoshop. You have to do some work in Photoshop to get anything out of it. It's not like auto-tune. I've used auto-tune. You have to be able to sing reasonably to get anything coming out the other end that feels like a human performance. I'm trying to see the worst side. This conversation, my book, and the conversations I've been having about AI are much more concerned about trying to see the downside, because the downside is harder to see when the bauble of the new technology is so wonderful and so diverting. It's hard for people to imagine how this could go wrong. That's Midjourney calling me now to say, stop talking about it. AI tools in other areas will do the same to those areas as well. So if everybody can do anything, then that whole world of illustration, of commercial work is completely redundant. Why would anybody need an illustrator to do it when everybody can do it? But the thing that's missing is the hope in this. The thing that I sort of grab onto as some hope that I might actually be able to carry on with my life is all the stuff that you don't see in these images. I don't see intent. When I look at a painting by somebody I love, the great songwriting, the great composing, the great filmmaking, the great writing, the great painting and drawing, there is a life bound into that. If it comes across to you and affects you deeply and profoundly, what you're connecting with is not just a surface technique. You're connecting with the life of the person that made it. Art, for me, has a very particular definition. It's a human activity. I've had arguments with people about, a beautiful sunset that they've said, look at that extraordinary sunset. Now, to me, that's art. That's the other person talking. For me, it's not art. It's nature. If you make a painting of that, if you interpret that through the human imagination, then it can become art if it's good. Everything around you is not art. It's not art until it's gone through the process of being interpreted and understood and redefined as part of the creative process of being human.